Hang's Celestials. Chapter 1. The sun dawned bright over the rice paddies on the outskirts of Bao village in central China. Roosters crowed as Hang Yan stepped outside into the crisp morning air, taking a deep breath. At 26 years old, Hang couldn't be more excited about the future ahead of him. In just 2 short months, he would finally be marrying his childhood sweetheart, Mei. They'd grown up together in Bao, playing in the fields and getting scolded by their parents for staying out after dark. Now Mei's parents had given their blessing for the match. Hang set off on his bicycle down the dirt road toward the village center, rice fields stretching out on either side of him. He waved to old man who tending his vegetable patch. The nopal's cactus fence around Lao Wu's property was getting scruffy again, Hang noticed. His mind wandered as he pedaled past the familiar houses and gardens he had known since birth. This morning Hang was headed to oversee the new house he was building on a plot of land just west of the village. It was to be his wedding gift to Mei, who still lived with her parents in their cramped home near the village square. When Hang first told his own parents that he wanted to build a small house for Mei, they were skeptical. "You should save your earnings for seeds and farming costs, not a fancy new house," his father grumbled. But Hang's mother took pity on him, slipping some extra yuan his way on occasion. "Follow your heart," she had whispered with a knowing smile. It took Hang over a year of meticulous saving, but finally he was able to purchase a 1/4-acre parcel from old man who no longer farmed. Then Hang spent several months planning and laying the foundation for the simple 1-story home. Now the house was nearly complete, with plaster walls and a tile roof. Hang felt proud seeing it come together with his own 2 hands. This would be the perfect place for him and Mei to start their new life together as husband and wife. When Hang arrived at the house, the morning sun was just peeking over the roof. He stood admiring it for a moment, the shuttered windows, the bright red door he had painted himself. Soon Mei would be standing here next to him, he thought happily. "Good morning," a voice called out, interrupting Hang's daydream. It was Jiang, the young farmer who worked in Hang's parents' rice fields. He lived just up the road. "Jiang," Hang said warmly. The 2 men shook hands. "What brings you out here so early?" "I was headed to the fields and wanted to see your progress," Jiang explained. "It's looking really nice." Hang smiled proudly. "Almost done now. I think Mei will be pleased." The men chatted about construction details as the sun rose higher in the sky. Eventually, Jiang looked at his watch. "I better get to the fields before your father starts wondering where I am," he said with a chuckle. They said their goodbyes and Jiang headed off down the road. Hang took one last long look at the house, imagining Mei's pretty face lighting up when she saw it for the first time. Then he mounted his bicycle and started his own journey toward the rice fields, ready for a long day's work. That evening after dinner, Hang decided he wanted to see the house again as the last light faded from the sky. "I'm going for an evening walk," he told his parents. "I'll be back soon." "Don't stay out too late," his mother replied. "It's already getting dark." Hang promised he would return shortly and set off along the familiar dirt road. Dusk wrapped around him as he walked, the moon peeking between clouds overhead. It was cool and quiet, with just the sound of night birds chirping in the brush. When Hang arrived at the house, he paused to light his kerosene lantern. Shadows danced across the plastered walls as he stepped inside. He ran his hand over the smooth wooden windowsill and glanced up at the thatched ceiling. Yes, this would be the perfect first home for him and Mei, Hang thought contentedly. They would sit together in the evenings, watching the stars through the window, talking softly about their future. Hang allowed himself to become lost in his imagination for a while as he lingered in the peaceful house. But finally he noticed the lantern burning low and knew it was getting late. With one last look around, he blew out the lantern and stepped back outside into the night. The full moon had risen high overhead now, bathing the dirt road in pale light. Hang walked slowly, listening to the low chirping of insects in the brush. He was tired but fulfilled after his long day's work, ready to rest up for another day tomorrow and for the happy days to come. As Hang strolled down the deserted road, he began humming quietly to himself. Thinking of May, thinking of their new home, thinking of the future. He didn't notice the strange flickering light in the sky above him, or hear the soft hum growing steadily louder. In an instant, everything went black, and Hang Yan vanished into the darkness. Chapter 2. Sunlight streamed through the window as Hang's mother kneaded dough for the morning meal. She paused and glanced outside, noticing the empty yard. Usually Hang was up before dawn to begin his chores, but today there was no sign of him. "Has Hang gotten up yet?" she asked her husband. He sat sipping tea, ready to depart for a long day working in the rice paddies. Hang's father frowned. "I haven't seen him this morning. Lazy boy is probably still in bed." "Would you go check on him?" his mother asked. She had a strange feeling in her stomach that something wasn't right. With a huff, Hang's father stood up and clomped toward his son's small bedroom in the back of the house. He slid open the door, expecting to find a still sleeping Hang who he could scold for oversleeping. But the bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. Puzzled, Hang's father walked back out to the kitchen. "He's not there," he told his wife. "Maybe he went to the village early to run errands." But Hang's mother still looked concerned. It wasn't like Hang to just take off without telling them, even if he had woken up early for some reason. Just then, there was a knock at the front door. Jiang, the young farmer who worked their land, entered looking slightly breathless. "Have you seen Hang this morning?" he asked them. "He didn't meet me in the fields at sunrise like usual." Hang's parents exchanged a worried glance. Now they knew something was very wrong. "We thought he was with you," Hang's father said, standing up from the table. "Let's go check the village. Maybe someone there has seen him." The three set out into the center of Bal, asking everyone they encountered if they had seen Hang that morning. But no one had. At the food market, the butcher said Hang hadn't come to pick up his regular order of pork for dinner. The apprehension in the pit of Hang's mother's stomach grew. Where could her son be? After scouring the village and finding no trace of Hang, his parents returned home hoping maybe he had turned up there. But the house remained empty. "I need to go open the shop," Hang's father said reluctantly. As a tailor, he had customers coming by for clothing repairs and fittings. "You two keep asking around for any sign of Hang. I'll close up early and meet back here." Jiang headed toward the rice fields while Hang's mother went door to door through the village once again, growing more frantic. But no one had any useful information. Hang had simply vanished. Worry gnawed at Hang's mother as she cooked dinner that evening for her husband. Jiang joined them, looking crestfallen after searching all day to no avail. The three picked at their food, silence hanging over them. "He's never disappeared like this before," his mother finally said, voicing their shared fear. "Something is very wrong. I just feel it." "We'll form a search party first thing in the morning," Hang's father decided. "I'll go to the village committee and ask them to gather volunteers." Hang's mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She tried to push away the dark thoughts creeping into her mind. Hang had to be somewhere, and they were going to find him. Early the next morning, Hang's father went to the village hall as planned. Word had already spread about Hang's disappearance, and dozens of people crowded the hall ready to help. Old Man Hu, the farmer who had sold Hang the land for his new house, stepped forward. "Have you checked that property?" he asked Hang's parents gravely. "Could be something happened to the boy out there while he was working." A shiver went through Hang's mother. No, surely he was fine when he left there last night, she thought. But Old Man Hu had a point. They had to cover that area too. She turned to Jiang, who had faithfully shown up again at dawn. "Can you run out to the house and have a look around?" she asked. "Just to be sure." Jiang quickly agreed and headed out on foot toward the fields, as the rest of the search party organized themselves. If there was even a chance Hang was hurt at the construction site, he had to check immediately. 20 anxious minutes later, Jiang returned breathless. "I searched the whole property," he told Hang's parents. "No sign of anything wrong, no sign of Hang at all." The search party fanned out in groups of 2 or 3, taking different sections of the surrounding land. All morning they combed the area, looking for any shred of evidence that could explain Hang's disappearance. But they found nothing. As noon approached, the exhausted groups gathered back in the village center to regroup. Grim faces surrounded Hang's parents as they shook their heads. No one had seen any trace of Hang. "We'll keep looking this afternoon and evening," Hang's father told the search party, his voice strained. "Thank you all for your efforts." The long day wore on as they continued their desperate search. Only when darkness fell completely did Hang's father finally call a halt, despite his wife's protests. There was nothing more they could do until sunlight returned. Another gray dawn rose the next day as the search efforts resumed. But once again, the hours drifted by without any break in the case. By late afternoon, Hang had been missing for over 36 hours. As the search party members quietly packed up for the night, defeat hung palpably in the air. Not a single clue to where Hang had gone. In the following days, smaller groups still regularly took time to sweep the village outskirts in hopes of finding something. But inside Hang's family home, a cloud of despair grew. Each hour that Hang remained missing made it less likely he would return unharmed. 1 week after Hang's disappearance, his mother finally forced herself to walk to the village hall. She asked the clerk to send a telegram to the nearest police station, reporting her son missing, even though he was surely a grown man by now. The clerk's face was sympathetic as he took down the details. Hang's mother walked back home, clutching her stomach, hardly believing this was real. Her boy was gone without a trace, and she didn't know if she'd ever get him back. Chapter 3. Nearly 2 weeks after Hang's disappearance, his family's despair was turning to numbness. With still no clues found during search efforts, most people were slowly resigning themselves to the idea that Hang was gone for good. But Hang's mother maintained a tiny flicker of hope. Each morning when she rose before dawn, she half expected to see Hang's lanky frame emerge through the doorway ready for a day's work in the fields. And each morning that he didn't, her heart broke again. Hang's father still opened up his tailor shop daily, relying on routine to get him through. Though his smiles came less easily as loyal customers gingerly asked if he had any updates about his missing son. Jiang continued tending the fields, but it was obvious his usual carefree whistle was missing. A grim silence had settled over the landscape. In the rest of Bao village, too, Hang's disappearance had cast a pall. His childhood friends spoke of him now in hushed, past tense whispers. Preparations ceased for the wedding that was never to be. May Hang's betrothed had collapsed in Wales when first hearing the news. Though outwardly, she now maintained a stony, silent grief. The day after Hang had vanished, May's parents went straight to the village committee office. "Our daughter's fiancé is missing," they reported in agitated voices. "Why has no search party been set?" The clerk on duty glanced up with a frown, explaining they had only just received the report of Hang's disappearance from his own family. Forms needed to be processed and city police notified before resources could be allocated. May's parents left unsatisfied, joining the search efforts themselves. But as the days passed with no breaks, they too began to lose hope. May shut herself in her bedroom for hours on end, eyes constantly rimmed red. Though she still clung fiercely to the jade engagement pendant Hang had shyly presented her when they were 17. After 2 weeks with no progress, 3 officers from the city police station finally arrived in Bao. They interviewed Hang's parents, Jiang, and other villagers, trying to piece together a timeline. But their questions revealed nothing new. "We will keep the investigation open, but there are no clear signs of foul play," the late officer told Hang's father with an officious glance at his clipboard. "Your son is an adult. Sometimes young men simply wish to leave home for a new life. Often they turn up again eventually." As they left, Hang's mother let out a strangled cry, collapsing into her husband's arms. "He wouldn't just leave us," she wept. "Something terrible happened to our boy. I just know it." Her husband simply held her shaking frame, his own eyes damp. The officer's words had only reinforced the growing feeling that Hang was never coming home. A week later, with still no updates, the investigation was quietly suspended. Cases with more obvious evidence took higher priority for the short-staffed rural police force. The final confirmation of the police giving up hit Hang's parents hard. As much as they had known deep down that hope was fading, it was different to lose that last lifeline. Their only son was truly gone. On what would have been Hang's 27th birthday 1 month after his disappearance, his mother methodically prepared all his favorite childhood foods. She left an offering on the family altar, whispering a prayer through quiet tears that Hang's spirit would find comfort. That night, Hang's father held his wife's shoulders as she shuddered with sobs that seemed they would never end. "Our boy should be here celebrating with us," she choked out. "He should be starting his new life, not gone without a trace." Her husband swallowed thickly, unable to find any words to ease her pain. "I know," he finally murmured. "I miss him terribly, too." In the deep darkness of early morning, after finally crying herself to exhaustion, Hang's mother was roused by a loud knock at the front door. Heart pounding, she rushed to open it. Could Hang somehow be standing there? But it was only her neighbor old man who, clutching a piece of paper and looking grave. "This telegram arrived for you just now," he said breathlessly. "I told the delivery boy to bring it straight to me." With trembling fingers, Hang's mother took the telegram. Her mind spun. Who could be contacting them, and what news did they bring? As she read the brief message, she staggered backwards with a gasp. It's about Hang," she stammered. "He's alive." Chapter 4. Hang's mother stood in stunned silence, hands shaking as she clutched the telegram. According to the brief message, her son had been found alive 600 miles south in the city of Nanjing. But how was this possible? The telegram stated only the barest details, that a young man matching Hang's description had been discovered unconscious on a sidewalk near the Nanjing railway station 2 days prior. When he awoke in hospital, still disoriented, he gave his name as Hang Yan and said he was from Bao village. Hang's parents stared at each other wordlessly, almost afraid to believe it could be true. None of it made any sense. How could Hang have ended up in Nanjing when he had disappeared without a trace from their isolated village? He possessed no car or money to travel such a distance. Is he all right? Hang's mother finally whispered, hands still shaking. Old man who scanned the telegram once more, brow furrowed. It says he was found with no obvious injuries, but remains confused and unable to explain how he got to Nanjing. The hospital has requested someone come identify him. Hang's father stood up immediately. Then I will leave for Nanjing as soon as I can acquire a train ticket, he declared. I must see my son with my own eyes. Despite the early hour, he rushed straight to the village train station window. The clerk looked startled as Hang's father pounded on the glass, demanding the first available ticket south. There is a train at 8:25 am, but only one first-class seat left, the clerk informed him. I'll take it, Hang's father said, hastily counting out the cash. The first-class fare would consume nearly a week's earnings, but he hardly cared. He only knew he had to get to his son. After hurrying home to grab a small bag, Hang's father returned to the station. As he waited anxiously on the platform for the train's arrival, old man who approached him, clasping a small bundle. I know you must hurry to see Han, but please deliver this medicinal tea to him, old man who entreated. It will restore his strength for the journey home. Hang's father gratefully accepted the package. As the train whistle blew in the distance, he shook old man whose hand firmly, thanking him again for bringing word of his son. Then Hang's father boarded the train, settling into a worn velvet seat as the engine lurched forward. The hours passed in jittery tension and disbelief as he watched the landscape roll by outside the smeared window. How could Hang be alive and so far from home? None of it made sense. But the telegram had provided one specific detail, a description of Hang's distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark on his left shoulder. That had to mean it was truly Hang discovered in Nanjing, impossibly far away. Night had fallen by the time the train finally arrived at Nanjing Station. Despite his exhaustion, Hang's father hurried to flag down a bicycle taxi to take him straight to the hospital. He had to confirm that this was indeed his son. At the hospital, nurses had already been notified to expect Hang Yan's family member from Bao village. But they looked surprised when a gray-haired, withered farmer rushed into the ward, frantically asking about the young man brought in days earlier. I'm Hang Yan's father, he explained breathlessly. I need to see him right away. The head nurse's face softened. Of course, he was quite confused when he awoke and has been asking for his parents right this way. She led Hang's father down a long hallway to a small private room. And there in the hospital bed, looking thin and bewildered but utterly familiar, was his son. Hang's father halted in the doorway as relief crashed over him, quickly followed by confusion. My boy, he whispered. Hang looked up, his eyes slowly focusing on the unexpected visitor. Father, he rasped in disbelief. You're really here? His father rushed forward to embrace Hang, tears coursing down his weathered cheeks. He had so many questions, but for now none of that mattered. Hang was here, alive, safe in his arms again. The nurse discreetly stepped out as father and son clung to each other, overcome with emotion. Finally, Hang's father drew back, just holding his son's thin shoulders and staring at him intently. "But how?" was all he could say. Hang shook his head, looking dazed and lost. "I don't know," he murmured. "I don't know how I got here." His father slowly sat down in the chair by the bedside, trying to comprehend this mystery. He gazed wordlessly at Hang for a long time. Finally, he remembered the bundle old man who had entrusted him with. He withdrew the medicinal tea leaves, steeping them in a cup of hot water from the nurse's kettle. "Drink this," he encouraged, pressing the cup into Hang's hands. "It will help you recover your strength for the journey home." Home. The word seemed to stir something in Hang. He drank the tea slowly before sinking back onto his pillows, looking utterly exhausted. There were so many questions to ask, so much to understand. But for now, Hang just needed to rest. His father kept vigil at his bedside as Hang drifted off to sleep. The baffling circumstances of his son's reappearance could wait until morning. For now, it was enough just to look at Hang's face and know he had his beloved boy back. Chapter 5. Pale dawn light filtered through the window as Hang slowly awoke in the unfamiliar hospital room. For a moment, he was confused to see his father slumped in the chair beside him, softly snoring. Then it all came rushing back of the telegram saying he had mysteriously turned up in Nanjing, his father's desperate journey to confirm it was really him. Hang gingerly sat up, still feeling weak and dazed after whatever had happened. The stirring sounds roused his father, who bolted upright and looked around in alarm before focusing on Hang. A smile broke across his weathered face. "You're awake, my boy," he exclaimed. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Still a bit shaken," Hang admitted. "But much better now that you're here." He was relieved to see this familiar face after days surrounded by doctors and nurses asking questions he couldn't answer. A nurse bustled in to check Hang's vital signs. She nodded in satisfaction. "Your strength is returning well," she told him. "The doctor says you should be all right to travel in a day or two." Hang and his father exchanged an eager look at the prospect of going home. Though deep down, Hang felt a tangled knot of apprehension too. Something inexplicable had happened to him to end up here alone and confused. What would he find when he returned? After Hang was discharged from the hospital the following day, he and his father began the lengthy train journey back to Bao village. As the scenery rushed past the window, his father gently asked him again what he last remembered before awakening in Nanjing. But Hang only shook his head helplessly. "The days just before are a blur," he murmured. "I remember walking home after working on my house." He flushed, not wanting to mention his wedding plans just yet. But after that, nothing. His father squeezed his shoulder. "It's all right. We're just thankful you seem unharmed. Your mother has been worried sick, but now we have you back." Hang managed a small smile. At least being reunited with his family would help ground him after this unexplainable experience. Exiting the train station 2 days later, Hang halted in surprise to see the whole village seemingly there to meet him. A cheer went up as he was spotted. His mother rushed forward, enfolding him in her embrace as she wept. "My dear boy, I thought I'd lost you forever," she cried. Over her shoulder, Hang saw many familiar faces gazing at him in awe, as if not quite believing he was real. The walk back to his family's house was like a day's parade, with people reaching out to pat his shoulder and welcome him home. But their smiles held looks of unease too. Hang realized with a sinking feeling that to them, he had become something strange and inexplicable. Alone in his small, familiar bedroom that night, everything finally caught up to Hang. He broke down, sobbing into his sheets like a lost child. He wanted everything to feel normal again, to pick up his life where he had left off. But now there would always be this unexplained gap torn through the middle. In the morning, Hang told his worried parents that he simply needed rest. He avoided meetings with the curious villagers who came knocking. Only Jiang, his friend who worked the fields, did Hang allow to visit. "It's so odd, isn't it?" Jiang mused after Hang haltingly described waking up in Nanjing with no memory. "It's like you vanished into thin air that night. Well, I'm just glad to have you back, my friend." Despite Jiang's warm manner, Hang noticed him glancing occasionally at the door, as if wanting to escape. Even he apparently could not help viewing Hang differently now. After a week spent mostly hidden away in his room, Hang knew he needed to face everyone again. His mother had been gently pressing him to go and see Mei, who was still devastated, thinking Hang had abandoned her without even a goodbye. Taking a deep breath, Hang walked to Mei's family home, knocking cautiously on the wooden door. Mei answered, letting out a shocked gasp when she saw him standing there. "Hang," she cried. You are home." She dissolved into tears before Hang could even speak. He helplessly put his arms around her as she cried into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry I left without explaining, my dear," he said wretchedly. "You must have been so frightened, but something happened that I cannot understand." He recounted waking up in Nanjing, seeing the telegram, his father identifying him in the hospital. Mei listened intently, eyes wide. "But where were you before that?" she asked in a hushed voice. Hang could only shake his head, tears pricking his own eyes. "I don't know. My mind goes blank after leaving our new house." They squeezed his hand tightly. "I prayed every day you would come back to me," she whispered. "Maybe the ancestors were watching over you." Despite Mei's warm welcome, however, Hang noticed her parents watching him curiously through the window. He kissed Mei's cheek, promising to see her tomorrow, suddenly needing fresh air. Walking slowly back home, Hang felt like a stranger in his own village now. He had returned from the unfathomable, and it had left an indelible mark upon him. Try as he might to resume normal life, a part of him was forever changed. And the village that once welcomed him unconditionally now looked upon him with wariness and mistrust, fearing what unknown forces had returned him to their midst. Chapter 6. Over the next several weeks, Hang gradually tried to settle back into the routines of daily life in Bao Village. He rose before dawn each morning to head to the rice fields, nodding politely to neighbors but keeping conversation minimal. At home, he quietly helped his mother with housework in the afternoons. And every few days he would call on Mei, attempting to make up for his unexplained absence on the eve of their marriage. But no matter how Hang kept his head down, focusing on work, he could not ignore the furtive glances and hushed gossip that followed everywhere he went. His inexplicable disappearance had fueled endless rumors now that the initial joy at his return had faded. "Do you think he ran off with another woman and made up this whole vanished story?" Hang overheard a grandmother whisper loudly to her friend as he passed by one morning. "I heard he gambled away all the wedding funds and didn't want to face his parents' wrath," someone else speculated. The most common theory was that spirits or vengeful ghosts had possessed Hang, transporting his body to Nanjing against his will. This talk sent a chill down Hang's spine. He wanted to scream that he had no memory of any supernatural events. But who would believe him? At the dinner table one night, Hang finally voiced his frustrations to his parents. "Why does everyone look at me differently now?" he burst out, chopsticks clattering as he dropped them. "I didn't ask for any of this to happen." His mother's face softened with sympathy. "They are simple villagers grasping for explanations," she said. "Gossip spreads quickly where life is unchanging. Try not to let it trouble you." But Hang noticed that even his parents now watched him closely, as if expecting him to vanish any moment. His mother prepared dried fish and eggs in the mornings, said to deter evil spirits from the home. She murmured Buddhist sutras through the day to calm any supernatural forces, possibly still clinging to her son. The only place Hang found any real peace was at the small house he had built on the village outskirts. Work there had resumed, a bit slower since he now often labored alone. The familiar sawdust and clay soothed his mind. This was where he and May were meant to start their new life together. Hang held fast to the notion that once they married and moved here, away from the claustrophobic streets of Bal, things could feel normal again. May did her best to comfort Hang amidst the village rumors. But he sensed her hesitation too, an unspoken fear of what changes this ordeal may have wrought within him. She still wore his engagement pendant, but now fingered it anxiously when she thought Hang wasn't looking. Their once effortless conversation was now strained and stilted. Nonetheless, Hang pushed forward, working night and day to finish the house. He wanted to prove to May, and to himself most of all, that they could overcome this. That pure love would banish any lingering darkness. When at last the day came to move May's belongings to the little house, Hang felt nearly hopeful. They strolled together that evening through each finished room, May nodding in admiration. This would be their haven, a new foundation for their life ahead. But May still seemed distracted and on edge. At dinner, she picked silently at her rice bowl, despite her usually hearty appetite. When Hang gently took her hand asking what was wrong, she flinched away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, eyes downcast. "I just need more time." His heart sinking, Hang could only nod in resignation. They slept in separate rooms that night. Just before dawn, Hang was roused by muffled sobs. Moving quietly to May's room, he slid open the door to find her crumpled on her mattress clutching her jade pendant, tears flowing freely. "I prayed for this, to have you back," she choked out upon seeing him. "But now I am so frightened, Hang. If you could disappear once, could it happen again? I cannot live like that, always wondering if you are still here." Kneeling, Hang held her as she wept. He had no words of reassurance, because even he still wondered if whatever forces had taken him once might someday return. And he could not honestly promise May a life free of that fear. In the morning light, he regrettably agreed it was best for May to return home for now. Perhaps with time, the comfort of familiarity would overcome her renewed apprehensions about him. They bid each other a somber farewell, no longer able to ignore the wedge this bewildering ordeal had driven between them. Trudging back alone, Hang fought tears himself. He had clung to the hope of resuming his old life with May upon returning. But now he saw that hope was shattered, like a priceless Ming vase tossed to the ground. Something irrevocable had splintered between them, and the seeds of distrust sown in the village had found fertile ground, even in May's once welcoming heart. Hang spent the next few days in a gloomy fog, going through the motions of work and meals, but speaking little. At night, he lay awake replaying his last painful conversation with May. Perhaps he had been naive to think they could simply brush past his inexplicable weeks-long disappearance. But he had hoped their deep love would withstand this strangeness. Instead, like sand through his fingers, he felt their once solid bond eroding. and he did not know how to repair something so broken. At dinner one evening, Hang's mother placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "My dear, you have endured so much," she said softly. "But you cannot let this ordeal defeat you." Hang blinked back tears, shaking his head. "I've tried, Mother," he said wretchedly. "But I see now that my life here can never be the same." His mother's face held sadness and sympathy. Finally, she said, "When we cannot change circumstances, we must look inward. Peace comes from accepting what we cannot control." Her calming words touched Hang's heart. She was right. Railing against things beyond his understanding would not restore what he had lost. The only choice was to make peace with it and find new joy where he could. From that day forward, Hang focused on filling his hours constructively. He rose early and worked hard in the fields each day. At home in the evenings, he took over many household chores so his aging parents could rest. Though he still remained withdrawn from the villagers, only exchanging short pleasantries when passing by. And several times a week, Hang rode his bike out to the small house to resume work, finishing its construction. He knew now it would never shelter his own family. But still, the satisfaction of seeing it whole gave him purpose. When a young newlywed couple from the village admired it one day, Hang graciously offered to sell it to them for a fair price. Their delighted smiles when they moved in did warm Hang's heart, if only briefly. As the weeks passed, Hang fell into his new solitary routine. The rumors about him gradually died down as simpler folk focused on their own lives. His disappearance became just another strange tale whispered to children at night. Only the elders still shook their heads and crossed themselves when he passed by. They remained polite when they encountered each other in the village square. But the easy affection between them was gone. She had a new job now, apprenticed to the herbalist, and spoke happily of her studies whenever they spoke. Her life, it seemed, was moving forward. Though still quiet and withdrawn compared to before, Hang was gradually learning to accept his new version of normal. He missed his old life dearly, but did not dwell on dreams of the past. Each morning when he awoke, he faced the day with determination to be at peace. Then one warm midsummer night, as Hang slept soundly after a long day's work, inexplicable forces plucked him once more from the fabric of the familiar world he had fought so hard to rebuild. And this time, the mystery of his fate would only deepen further. Chapter 7. Confused sounds slowly filtered into Hang's awareness. A bell ringing, voices murmuring, the rattle of carts over pavement. He struggled to open his eyes, his mind still sluggish and detached. As his blurry vision came into focus, Hang bolted upright with a gasp. He was slumped on the dirty sidewalk of what appeared to be a bustling train station. Hundreds of travelers swarmed around him, giving him puzzled glances. The ringing train bell sounded again as a whistle blew shrilly. Hang blinked, disoriented and alarmed. The last thing he remembered was falling asleep peacefully in his own bed at home in Bal Village. And now suddenly he was in the midst of a crowded, unfamiliar city. Heart pounding, Hang staggered to his feet. How could this be happening again? After months of struggling to rebuild normalcy in his life, he had once more been wrenched violently from everything familiar and found himself unexplainably somewhere new. Fighting waves of panic, Hang approached a gray-haired man, striding past him and stammered, "Excuse me, where am I? How did I get here?" The man gave him an impatient look. "This is Shanghai Railway Station, of course. Are you drunk or just lost?" He brushed past Hang, hurrying toward his train. Shanghai. Hang's mind reeled. But how? Shanghai was over 800 kilometers from Bao. For him to wind up at this bustling metro station made no sense. People continued rushing by Hang as he stood frozen amidst the crowds. He anxiously patted his cotton trousers and tunic, but he had no belongings on him, no wallet, no train ticket. No clues at all to explain his shocking transportation to Shanghai. Seeing Hang's distress, a young mother balancing an infant on one hip approached him. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked kindly, her eyes worried. "Do you need assistance?" Swallowing hard, Hang managed to grate out, I don't know how I got here. I'm from a village very far away and just woke up here suddenly." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief and sympathy. She shifted her baby to her other hip. "Well, you appear unharmed at least," she said gently. "The police station is just across the road there. They can radio your village and help you get home." Thanking her profusely, Hang made his way through the bustling station and across the street. But upon entering the small police station and trying to explain his impossible situation to the skeptical officers, events took an even more bizarre turn. Before Hang could finish his wild story, the front doors burst open. Two uniformed soldiers strode purposefully inside, their expressionless faces homing in on Hang. To his shock, they walked right up and addressed Hang by name. "Come with us now," one ordered tersely. "Don't ask questions." Too stunned to resist, Hang obeyed as the soldiers firmly steered him back outside. The officers made no move to stop them. Bundling Hang into the back of a nondescript van, the soldiers drove off without explaining where they were taking him or why. The ride lasted nearly an hour, the soldiers ignoring Hang's increasingly desperate pleas for information. Finally, they turned down a narrow dirt road leading to a remote military encampment ringed by barbed wire fencing. When the van halted, Hang was quickly ushered out. His heart dropped into his stomach as he took in the rows of barracks, the armed guards stationed around the perimeter. This day had become more impossible by the minute. The silent soldiers marched Hang across the compound toward a nondescript concrete building. A sign by the entrance read, "Division Headquarters." What on earth kind of division? Hang wondered fearfully. And what did they want with him? He was brought inside, down a sterile hallway to an austere office. There, a uniformed officer with steely gray eyes glanced up from some paperwork, regarding Hang curiously. "So, you are the young man found disoriented and out of place at the railway station today," the officer stated. It was not a question. Unease prickled through Hang's skin. "Why, yes, but I don't know how I got there," he stammered. "I just want to go home. It must be some mistake." The officer held up a hand. "Let us not play games. You know very well how you got there." His stare bored into Hang. Hang could only gape back helplessly, utterly lost. The officer studied him a moment longer, then continued in a brisk tone. "Now then, report to me the specifics of your recent reconnaissance assignment. Start from when you arrived on location." Reconnaissance assignment? Hang's knees nearly buckled in shock. None of this could possibly be real. I'm just a rice farmer from Bell Village," he choked out. "I don't know anything about any assignment. I don't even know where I am." The officer's expression remained impassive, but Hang saw a flicker of doubt cross his face. Standing abruptly, the officer walked around his desk to look Hang over more closely. He took in Hang's mud-caked boots, rough peasant clothing, and calloused farmer's hands. After a long, tense silence, the officer stepped back. "Very well, I shall make some calls to verify your story," he finally said. "If you are who you claim to be, you clearly have no place here. Wait outside while I sort this matter out." Stumbling gratefully from the room, Hang slid down the wall to the floor outside, head in hands. Whatever strange forces had brought him here, he prayed the officer would realize the truth and allow him to leave. Because he knew with chilling certainty now, this was no dream nor hallucination. For the second time in his life, Hang had been inexplicably transported hundreds of miles from home without explanation. Only this time he sensed he had landed somewhere darker and even more dangerous. Chapter 8. Slumped outside the mysterious officer's door, Hang had no sense of how much time was passing. No one came in or out of this remote corridor. He strained his ears for any sounds from within the room, but could make out nothing. His exhausted mind spun in helpless circles, searching for an explanation, but he kept returning to the same dead ends. How could he possibly have traveled here from Bal instantly, with no memory? Why did these military men seem to be expecting him? And would they even let him leave now that he inexplicably knew their secret location? At long last, the heavy door swung open. The officer stepped out, his expression still unreadable. "My inquiries to regional villages give no reason to doubt your story," he told Hang. "Therefore, I have decided you pose no security risk at present. Return to Shanghai at once. Do not speak of this encounter." With that, he turned abruptly and marched away down the hall. Stunned by his abrupt release, Hang clambered to his feet. Before he could fully process what was happening, the same two soldiers who had escorted him here emerged to steer Hang quickly back outside. Numbly, Hang climbed into the van again, exhaustion overpowering his fear and confusion for now. As they drove away from the foreboding base, Hang closed his eyes, lulled into an uneasy sleep by the van's rocking motions. Mercifully, his churning mind quieted for a little while. Jolting awake some time later, Hang blinked in surprise to find himself being shaken roughly by one of the soldiers. They had stopped along a busy Shanghai street. "Get out and do not speak of what happened today," the soldier commanded. His partner was already rolling up the van window, ready to drive off. Heart pounding, Hang clambered out onto the pavement. Before he could even gather his wits, the van had vanished into traffic. Dazed, Hang slowly turned in a circle, taking in the bustling shops and apartment buildings. The street showed no hints of the frightening military base he had been transported to and back from this bizarre day. Had it even been real? Hang wondered wildly. Or was he losing his mind? With no money for transport, Hang set off walking in the direction of Shanghai's train station. He kept his head down, integumenting into the flows of businessmen and laborers making their way along the crowded sidewalks. The miles-long walk gave Hang's racing mind space to process everything that had happened. None of it made any logical sense. And yet, the mounting evidence told him this was no mere vivid dream. For the second time now, Hang had been ripped suddenly from his Bal village home and deposited somewhere completely foreign. By the time Hang finally reached the station once more, night had fully fallen. Exhausted, he slumped on a bench trying to decide what to do next. He had no ticket for a return journey, nor any relatives in Shanghai to seek help from. Lost in thought, Hang did not notice two men approach him from the shadows. Not until they spoke his name directly, in the same emotionless cadence as the soldiers earlier. Hang jerked his head up with a gasp. Two nondescript men in plain clothing stood over him, But instantly Hang sensed they were no ordinary civilians. Every instinct told him to flee from these strangers who inexplicably knew his identity. But before Hang could react, the first man clamped a strong hand on his shoulder. "Come with us now, and do not make a scene," he commanded quietly. Heart hammering, Hang complied. He walked between the two men in tense silence out of the station into the night streets. They seemed to have a destination in mind, steering deliberately down several turns until arriving at a small public park. It was deserted at this late hour. At a gesture from the men, Hang sank wearily onto a stone bench. The first man regarded him steadily in the dim light. Up close, his face had an odd, pale cast. "I expect you have many questions," the man finally said. "It is best if we explain ourselves directly, so you do not continue assuming this is a dream." Hang stared, not comprehending. Who are you?" he managed. "Why did you bring me here?" "We are the ones responsible for transporting you to Shanghai earlier today," the man replied evenly. Hang's heart stuttered. "That was you?" he asked in a hushed voice. Amazement overcame his fear for a moment. The second man spoke up now in the same detached monotone. "We intervened when you were taken to the army base, as that was an unplanned destination. They do not currently comprehend what is transpiring." None of their cryptic words alleviated Hang's overwhelming confusion. He took a shaky breath. "Please," he implored. "I'm just a simple rice farmer. I don't understand any of this. Just let me go home." The first man's eyes bored into Hang's. "We cannot return you yet. Your role is not complete." Before Hang could demand what on earth they meant, both men abruptly looked skyward, as if listening to a silent signal. "We must not linger here," the first man announced. Moving with eerie synchrony, they stepped away from the bench. "Do not share details when you return home. We shall visit you there soon." And just like that, they vanished soundlessly into the night. Hang stared open-mouthed at the spot where they had stood. Then his vision blurred, and everything went black once again. Gasping awake in his own bed the next morning, Hang fumbled frantically at the familiar rough blankets. Weak sunlight was filtering through the window of his childhood room. He was in Bao. Heart still racing, Hang sat up slowly. Had it all been some twisted nightmare? But no, he could still vividly picture the bustling train station, the remote army encampment, the two mysterious men addressing him in the darkness. Somehow, impossibly, he had journeyed to Shanghai and back in less than a day's time. And something told Hang this inexplicable experience was far from over. Uncontrollable forces had entered his life, and nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 9. In the weeks after Hang's impossible Shanghai journey, he wrestled constantly with whether to tell anyone the truth about his bizarre experiences. His parents had only known he disappeared briefly from his bed again, this time reappearing unharmed at home. They worriedly made offerings at the village temple, praying this would be the last incident. Heart of Hang longed to unburden himself to his family or friends about the strange men and their claims of controlling his transportations. Maybe someone could help make sense of it all. But remembering the men's cryptic warnings not to share details kept him silent. Whatever was happening to him remained dangerous and unexplained. He did not wish to jeopardize his loved ones too. So Hang merely reassured his parents he felt fine now, settling back into his solitary rhythms of work and rest. Inside, however, his mind churned incessantly. He lived in dread of the next disappearance looming over him like a storm cloud. Strangely, after weeks with no further inexplicable events, Hang found himself almost wishing for it to happen again, just to end the suspense. At least then he might get additional answers from the eerie men. Then, one overcast morning, Hang received a cryptic message at his family's home, informing him the Regional Security Bureau required his presence for questioning that afternoon. His stomach dropped. Had word somehow reached the authorities about his Shanghai experiences? Donning his least frayed tunic, Hang presented himself at the village hall with apprehension that afternoon. Inside, he was met by two stern-faced officers who escorted Hang to a bare interrogation room. "Please sit," one officer instructed brusquely. He opened a folder as the other seated himself silently in the corner, watching Hang. "Hang Yan of Bao Village," the officer declared. "Our bureau has received strange reports regarding your movements around the country in recent months. You allegedly turned up days' travel from here, in places including Nanjing and Shanghai, with no explanation for how you got there. Is this true?" Heart racing, Hang hesitated, unsure how to answer. Finally, he gave a small nod. The officer's eyes narrowed. "I see, and how exactly did you manage to travel to these faraway places and back within a day's time?" Swallowing hard, Hang tried to gather his scrambled thoughts. I cannot explain it," he managed. "Each time I simply woke up somewhere unfamiliar, hundreds of miles from home." "And you have no memory at all of making the journey there? You expect me to believe you? What, teleported somehow?" The officer's voice dripped skepticism. Hang's shoulders hunched. "I only know I could not have traveled those distances myself in such a short period. I do not understand how it happened." Leaning forward, the officer drilled Hang with an intense stare. "Let me propose an alternate theory, then. Perhaps you are a Chinese operative receiving transport and instructions from classified sources, and now, under interrogation, it is convenient to feign ignorance. What do you say to that?" Hang could only gape at the officer. Him, a secret agent? It was laughable. "With respect, sir, you are mistaken," he replied earnestly. "I am telling the full truth. I am just a rice farmer. I have no government connections." The other officer in the corner spoke now for the first time. "Come now, Mr. Yan, enough games. Your missions to survey those cities clearly serve some classified purpose. Just cooperate, and this process can conclude quickly." Frustrated tears pricked Hang's eyes. Why could they not see how ludicrous this all was? "I swear on my ancestors' spirits, I have never been on any such mission," he implored. "When I awoke in those cities, I was as confused as you would be. I'm telling you, I don't know how it happened." The first officer stared Hang down sternly. "Mr. Yan, lying to us is unwise. We have means of verifying the truth." He withdrew a thin folder from his stack and opened it. "Our analysts use top-secret technology to extensively study your readiness, fingerprints, hair samples, and more while you were away. The biometric results leave no doubt of your presence across China on classified assignments." Hang's stomach plummeted. Somehow these mysterious forces had woven unexplainable evidence against him. He had no idea how to convince these men of the seemingly impossible reality. Desperate, he leaned forward. "If you truly doubt me, I will take any test," he exclaimed. "Truth serums, lie detector, anything. I beg you to see I am an unwilling victim here, not a spy." The first officer sat back, steepling his fingers contemplatively. Perhaps such tests are wise before proceeding further. He nodded to his partner. Prepare the room. Numbly, Hang allowed himself to be led to another sterile chamber down the hall. There he was seated in a chair and fitted with wires and sensors by a waiting technician. These will measure your heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, and perspiration as you are questioned, the technician informed Hang in a bored tone. Any deception will become quite clear. Over the next hour, the officers took turns calmly posing questions ranging from Hang's name and family members to precise details about his alleged trips across China. Throughout the exhaustive process, despite his complete bafflement over the unexplainable events being described, Hang focused on simply telling the literal truth, that he had no memory or comprehension of how he kept turning up in distant places overnight. Finally, the first officer handed Hang a glass of water, peering at the polygraph results. His brow was still furrowed, but Hang thought he detected a glimmer of something new in the officer's gaze. Uncertainty, or perhaps even traces of belief. Well, this is perplexing, the officer admitted slowly. Our readings detect no deception in your denials of these missions. He shook his head as if to clear it before fixing his steely gaze on Hang once more. Very well, we shall release you for now, but remain in this jurisdiction until our investigation concludes. I suspect we have much more to discuss. Nearly weak with relief after the marathon interrogation, Hang could only stammer his thanks and assurances of compliance. As he stepped outside into the fresh air, he gulped it down like a drowning man. The questions would only multiply from here, he knew. But just maybe, this grueling first step had cracked open a door for someone in authority to finally start believing these impossible truths. And if these inexplicable forces were to sweep Hang away once more, at least now there was a chance someone official might investigate, rather than immediately dismiss the bizarre happenings plaguing his life. For the first time since this nightmare began, Hang felt the smallest seed of hope take root within the swirling darkness and confusion. Because suddenly, he was no longer facing it alone. Chapter 10. In the weeks following his interrogation, Hang anxiously awaited word from the Security Bureau regarding their investigation. But as days turned to months with no updates, he felt his tentative hope slowly draining away. Clearly, the harsh officers remained unconvinced by Hang's impossible tale, even despite the unclear polygraph results. Helpless frustration welled up in him again. Why did this have to happen to a simple rice farmer? He had neither the power nor knowledge to make sense of any of it. In the absence of explanations, fear crept back in during his solitary days in the fields. At any moment, those mysterious forces could snatch him away again. He took to scribbling notes about each inexplicable trip immediately upon returning, in case his memory somehow became erased later. Hang's father gently suggested one evening that these trips were perhaps simply vivid dreams or delusions. The idea pierced Hang's heart. Even his own family thought him possibly insane now. I wish it were only in my mind, he replied quietly. But my absence each time has been confirmed. I beg you to still have faith in me, Father. His father just sadly patted his shoulder before returning to his newspaper, leaving Hang feeling more isolated than ever. Unexpectedly, a small ray of light entered Hang's lonely existence when Jiang began stopping by regularly after work. Jiang simply sat listening patiently as Hang unloaded his swirling thoughts and fears. Though likely skeptical, Jiang never accused Hang of lying or madness. You have always been honest and true, Jiang told him one evening as they shared some rice wine. Whatever the truth may be here, I know you speak it as you understand it. Others will recognize this in time. Bolstered by his friend's steadfast faith in him, Hang found the will to keep moving forward somehow, putting one foot in front of the other each day. If this was to be his strange new reality, he must find small ways to endure it with dignity. Then late one night, Hang awoke with a start at the sound of a visitor's voice murmuring his name. Heart-lurching, he sat up to see two shadowy figures sitting calmly at the foot of his bed, the same eerily pale men who had accosted him after Shanghai. Hang's breath caught with mingled shock and fear. "The time has come for you to accompany us again," one stated tonelessly. "Bring a jacket and shoes." Hardly daring to resist, Hang complied, thoughts racing wildly. Where were they taking him now? Would he return this time? The trio walked silently through the Prud'hon village until reaching its outskirts. There, the men turned abruptly to face Hang. "We will now demonstrate to you the means of transport you failed to recall," one announced. Before Hang could react, everything went black once more. Blinking slowly, Hang stumbled as his vision returned. The men stood impassively beside him in a bustling public square surrounded by ornate, stately buildings. Despite never visiting here, Hang somehow knew they must be in Beijing, the nation's great capital. "As you have now witnessed, we can move your body immense distances instantly, traversing the great expanse of China in less than a single heartbeat," the second man intoned. "It is this ability that has enabled your travels." Mind reeling, Hang struggled to grasp how any of this was possible. But here he stood in a place hundreds of miles from home, minutes after being in Bao. What are you?" Hang finally rasped out. The first man tilted his head slightly. "We are visitors from a very distant place. We mean you no harm. There are aspects of your planet we wish to study and require a native subject to accomplish this. You serve that role." Hang's pulse hammered. These bizarre beings kidnapping and studying him almost made more impossible sense than any human explanation. He sank weakly onto a stone ledge. "Why me?" he choked out. "Surely I cannot be the only subject of value on this entire planet." As soon as the words left Hang's lips, he regretted revealing any hint of usefulness to these unfathomable creatures. But the second man merely blinked those depthless eyes. "You possess a rare neurochemical constitution, enabling retention of conscious memory, even when transported through the void. Most human minds struggle reconciling the journey. Yours yet remains intact." So this was why Hang alone seemed cursed to endure full, horrifying awareness during each abduction away from his world. Far from relishing this awful gift, he yearned to throw it back at these beings who had shattered his life with it. Numbly, Hang listened as the visitors outlined further plans for study that would require his ongoing cooperation and travel. When they had finished, the first man said only, "Now we return you once more to your origin point." As Hang's bedrooms swirled back into being around him, he collapsed onto the mattress, every fiber of his being numb with shock. These inexplicable forces were no mere ghosts or delusions. They came from beyond the stars themselves, and Hang was utterly powerless in their grasp. Hang did not sleep at all that night, nor for several nights after. His mind was too consumed with replaying the visitor's impossible revelations. He had always known in his gut that something otherworldly was behind these bizarre abductions. But to have it confirmed was more terrifying than any human explanation could have been. Hang was now forced to accept that intelligent life beyond Earth existed, with technology advanced enough to fling him across continents in an instant. And they had selected him specifically as their unwilling subject for unknown explorations. The next morning, still bleary-eyed, Hang knew he had to try once more to make the authorities understand the truth. This went beyond anything their experience could explain, but if they would just listen with open minds, perhaps they could still help protect him. Steeling his nerves, Hang returned to the police station and asked to make an updated statement. The officer on duty reluctantly allowed it, clearly humoring the local oddball. Taking a deep breath, Hang gradually relayed the full story: the eerie midnight visitation, the instantaneous jumps across China, and finally the impossible explanation from inhuman visitors with unknowable intentions. The officer's eyebrows rose higher and higher. But to Hang's immense relief, he did not immediately dismiss the account as rambling nonsense. "Let me see if I understand," the officer said slowly. "You claim to have made contact with, not spirits or ghosts, but actual alien beings who seem to have selected you for these experiments." "I know how unbelievable it sounds," Hang replied fervently. "But please, I am begging you to consider that I may be telling the truth here." The officer sat silently for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "I will reopen our investigation and share this updated testimony with appropriate parties," he conceded. "This appears more complex than we initially realized. For now, write down any further details you can recall about these beings." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Hang hurried to record all he could remember before the fragile trust could evaporate. For the first time, he felt less totally alone against these impossible odds. Just one person showing a hint of belief had kindled his hopes. But after again hearing nothing for weeks, Hang's cautious optimism wavered. He returned once more to the station, only to find the officer abruptly transferred and a new face in his place. This one scoffed openly when Hang tried to explain. "Alien abductions, was it? I suppose little green men beamed you up to the mothership too," the officer said sarcastically. Crushed, Hang left with slumped shoulders before the man could laugh him all the way to a psychiatric ward. No matter how earnestly he appealed to those in power for help, they saw only the ravings of a madman. From that day forward, Hang withdrew into himself, interacting with others as little as possible. Let people stare and whisper as he passed by, no longer bothering to protest he wasn't insane. No one cared for the truth here. The weeks blurred into months as Hang merely existed, speaking when spoken to and going through his farm work robotically. The visitors sometimes still pulled him abruptly into the darkness, but he no longer resisted. What was the point? Late one night, after a particularly long and strange trip to a place the visitors called America, Hang accepted a rice wine invitation from Jiang. He knew it was not wise in his current state, but he was tired of being wise. As the wine flowed, words began spilling out almost against Hang's will, the full story of everything that had happened since that first impossible journey to Nanjing. How no one, not even his own family, believed him anymore. "I just wish it to end," he finished brokenly, tears he usually held back streaming down his face. "I cannot bear this loneliness any longer." Jiang listened silently until Hang had emptied himself completely. Then he reached out to grip his friend's shaking shoulder. "I still have faith in you and your spirit," Jiang said firmly. "There is purpose somewhere in this, even if not apparent. You must keep believing that, and refuse to surrender all hope." In vino veritas, Hang thought hazily. He knew wise Jiang spoke true. No matter how dark, he could not completely relinquish hope or lose himself. because that was exactly what the visitors wanted of their ghostly specimen. And Hang refused to become that, not fully or forever. Jiang's steadfast words resonated with Hang, reigniting the dim ember of determination within. As the weeks passed, Hang found his will to survive and maintain sanity slowly growing stronger again. He began keeping a detailed journal, carefully documenting each uncanny new destination the visitors transported him to, along with sketches of machinery and structures not of this earth. If he could not stop these abductions, at least he could record the impossible things revealed to him. Back in Bao, Hang took over teaching some village children their letters and numbers in the evenings, their bright smiles warming his heart. He played chess with Old Man Hu was always happy for a worthy opponent. And he made a greater effort to be present with his parents, taking his father fishing or accompanying his mother to market. She hugged Hang tightly one such morning and said, "It is good to see light in your eyes again." The visitors observed Hang's resurgence in spirit, as if he were simply a curious lab animal displaying renewed vigor. Human resilience remains highly unpredictable and irrational, he overheard one remark. Let them judge him as just another alien specimen, Hang thought defiantly. They may exploit his body and mind for some unknowable purpose, but they would never truly comprehend his inner spirit. That remained untouched within the sanctuary of his soul. This renewed sense of inner freedom helped calm Hang whenever the visitors arrived to inform him of their next experiment. He focused on maintaining presence and observing all he could, rather than being paralyzed by fear or despair. During one long voyage out among the stars themselves, Hang was permitted to glimpse the astonishing sight of Earth suspended like a vibrant jewel amid infinite darkness. Struck by its fragile beauty, Hang felt tears prick his eyes. My people down there fight and doubt one another, but from here I see only one united planet, he remarked in wonder. His observer made a small notation. Provincialism is common among primitive species confined to single worlds, came the toneless reply. The visitors may have opened Hang's eyes to cosmic truths, but in some ways their vast intelligence remained narrow and constrained. He was humbled to realize that perhaps both species still had much to discover in this vast universe. When the moment finally arrived years later for the visitors to conclude their study of humanity through Hang, he stood straight and met their fathomless gazes squarely. I remain ignorant of your true purposes in nature, Hang said evenly. But knowing now we are not alone in our universe, I will encourage my people to look with new eyes at the stars. For an instant, Hang thought he perceived a ripple of surprise in the visitors' usually impassive faces. But in a blink they vanished, returning Hang gently to his sleeping quarters in Bao. In the morning light, Hang knew with certainty that this was the end. No more inexplicable jumps across the earth or beyond, just the simple rising sun over familiar rice fields. The visitors had departed back to unknowable realms. Kneeling, Hang pressed his weathered palms to the ground in gratitude. Despite the toll of fear and doubt, he had survived with his hope intact. Now he could share what truths he dared, lighting candles in the darkness for all who struggled to understand. This planet was only one small, bright light in the great cosmic sea, but even the smallest light in time could guide others home. Chapter 11. Over the 2 decades since the visitor's sudden departure, Hang had gradually opened up to share his extraordinary tale with receptive minds. After a lifetime keeping impossible secrets, finally speaking his truth freely felt like emerging from a cocoon. He started by quietly confiding in Jiang, who had remained his steadfast friend through the ordeal. Jiang listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and encouraged Hang to record everything in greater detail. Armed with Jiang's patient support, Hang then approached his elderly village chief Chen, expecting to be swiftly dismissed as a madman. But Chen drew him inside, made tea, and listened to Hang's incredible story without a hint of judgment. "You show wisdom and courage beyond your years, enduring this reality alone for so long," Chen said when Hang had finished, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Now that these beings have departed our world, it is time your truth was known." To Hang's immense relief, Chen believed his fantastical tale completely. More incredibly, the respected village elder offered to vouch for Hang's character and help share his story where appropriate. For the first time, Hang felt fully accepted, rather than shunned. Chen introduced Hang to several forward-thinking scientists, receptive to paradigm-shifting discoveries, who questioned Hang rigorously about his experiences traveling the world and cosmos. Though unable to explain the technical aspects behind Hang's teleportation and observations, the researchers concurred he had truly witnessed things beyond existing human knowledge. One inquisitive physicist proposed an astonishing theory after reading Hang's copious notes. Many of the cosmic vistas and spatial distortions Hang described aligned with speculative principles the physicist had pioneered on black holes and wormholes. Perhaps the visitors possessed the ability to harness these cosmic tunnels somehow, enabling their impossible manipulation of space and time relative to Earth. Validated by leading thinkers, Hang slowly shared his account with more citizens from nearby villages and towns as opportunity arose. While some still dismissed him as delusional, many others found themselves drawn to Hang's open manner and detailed chronicle of encountering the unfathomable. Popular fascination with life beyond Earth was just beginning to blossom in Hang's province and across China. Over time, respected journals published first-hand interviews with Hang about his experiences. The mysterious visitors became known popularly as Hang's Celestials, reflecting both their otherworldly origins and their intersection with Hang's humble human life. One flurry of media interest was sparked by the release of official station logs and passenger records, confirming Hang had indeed turned up without explanation hundreds of miles from home on multiple occasions, just as he described. Few could refute the document's authenticity, causing even skeptical authorities to reevaluate Hang's account. But Hang turned down all offers to highlight his tale for fame or fortune. After a lifetime of turmoil, he sought only to live simply and honestly again. Let others dissect the mysteries. He focused on enjoying each new sunrise and moonrise over the tranquil fields surrounding Bao. There were always fresh wonders to behold, if one knew how to see them. Now, in his twilight years, Hang received occasional visitors eager to meet the unassuming man at the center of this global phenomenon. He welcomed them graciously into his modest home, serving tea and answering questions for those with open minds and good hearts. On one such day, as Hang slowly walked with a guest through the winding village streets he knew so well, the younger man asked with some awe, "Do you wish you could travel out there among the stars again?" Hang smiled up at the clear blue sky before answering thoughtfully. "I saw wonders and horrors beyond comprehension during my years of incomprehensible journeys," he replied. "But in the end, I think perhaps the most important discoveries come from exploring within." Hang rested a weathered hand over his heart. There are infinite galaxies inside each of us too, if we cultivate the patience and courage to seek them. His guest nodded slowly, gaze drifting up to the drifting clouds. Hang knew the truth of his words might only reveal itself to the young man over time. But he had planted the seed. That evening after supper, Hank slipped outside to watch the setting sun spread vivid hues across the evening sky. He breathed deeply, enjoying the crisp air. It was a good life now, simple and honest. He had walked fearful roads to the very stars, and returned to share what he could of their mysterious truths. But here, in this place he had always called home, Hank had found life's deepest purpose once again. The end.